All right, Jeff, it's now the noon session is beginning. If you'd like to start things off for us, and then we'll get into the presentation.
Sure, thank you. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jeff Haberman. I'm the city forester here in Rochester. I'd also like to introduce Chris Pfeiffer from Planet Geo. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to join us here today. I just want to give a little background on the process. More than a year ago, we began our urban forest master planning efforts. And we started the whole process by gathering information, which included doing a canopy assessment. And this just took an extensive look and collected a lot of data about the canopy cover in Rochester and where it existed. Next, we began by acquiring feedback from city staff, departments including Public Works, Community Development, and Rochester Public Utilities. We specifically reached out to stormwater folks, members of Rochester area builders, as well as gaining feedback from residents through some community polls and other meetings like this. Planet Geo then began to review the internal documents, management plans, ordinances, and policies that are currently being used by all departments that may have an impact on our urban forest. This information was then used in an auditing process that allowed us to measure how effectively we are sustainably managing our urban forest and identify shortcomings or where we can do better. So that's a pretty brief summary of how we got to where we are today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris from Planet Geo.
All right, thanks, Jeff. And thanks to everyone for taking the time to listen to our live meeting or the recording. As a reminder, there's also an evening session. So this is our noon session of the public meeting for the Urban Forest Master Plan. But if you know folks that aren't able to attend now, but may be available in the evening, that'll be at 6:30. And there's links that we can provide at the end of this presentation to connect to that meeting. But again, thanks everyone for attending here. And there's also going to be a recording and a copy of the presentation that can be made available as a resource going forward and to share with other folks who are unable to attend. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Chris Pfeiffer, Director of Urban Forestry Consulting for Planet Geo, and I'm the project manager for the Rochester Urban Forest Master Plan. Supporting the planning effort, we have GIS and natural resource specialist, Megan Blansett, who led the tree canopy analysis task and supporting studies, which we'll highlight in this presentation. We also have Andrew Carrier, an urban forestry consultant with Planet Geo, who was instrumental in the planning efforts to analyze the existing conditions of Rochester's urban forest. And we'll be highlighting those project findings as well in this presentation. So to set the stage for our presentation, I'd like to start off with a quote from a model of urban forest sustainability by James Clark and colleagues. And this quote reads, "Urban trees and forests are considered integral to the sustainability of cities as a whole. Yet sustainable urban forests are not born, they are made. They do not arise at random, but result from a community-wide commitment to their creation and management." So this quote is a great reminder that community engagement is vital to urban forestry planning. It describes the purpose of us gathering today and demonstrates the importance of a shared commitment to Rochester's urban forests, which will be guided by this Urban Forest Master Plan. For this presentation, we'll set the stage by describing the extent of the urban forest and what is covered in the Urban Forest Master Plan, which is also known as the UFMP or referred to as the Master Plan in this presentation. We'll also describe the services and benefits provided by Rochester's trees, the key issues facing the urban forest, and opportunities identified during our planning efforts, as well as through past community meetings like the one held in November of last year. Then to address the key issues and enhance the benefits of trees, our project approach includes research, data analysis, benchmarking research, and a systematic auditing process that has uncovered information relating to the urban forest that we'll present as project findings in this presentation. And then we'll also discuss the master plan's draft goals and actions that were developed based on the research, input from city staff, our data analysis, our benchmarking, and community input. And all of that information was applied to the urban forest audit to come up with these draft goals and actions. Then we'll conclude with a recap and summary of next steps, followed by an open discussion period using the chat box, poll responses that we'll have throughout this presentation, and then a live Q&A. So again, we ask that you utilize the chat box, and also there should be a feature to raise your hand when we have the open discussion at the end of this presentation and this meeting today. So keep those tools in mind. We want to hear from you throughout this discussion about the master plan. Before we dive into the presentation, I thought it'd be good to get folks warmed up with a poll to gather information about our audience, which will help us to develop strategies and outreach efforts going forward. So at this time, I'm going to open a poll, and we have a map showing the 6 wards in the city. And you may not be familiar with the wards exactly. So if you are unsure, you have the option to choose unsure in the selection, but you can use your best guess as well. This is just to help us see where the messaging is getting out to the city and where we could make improvements going forward. So now I'm going to launch the poll here. And it should be multiple choice if that applies to you. And it can also be whether you reside, work, or visit Rochester. Starting to see the votes coming in. And if folks have trouble seeing the image, Ward 3 is in the most northern, followed by 6, 5 to the northeast, 2 is more central, but to the west, 4 is central east, and 1 is south. And so we have about half of the attendees that have submitted an answer. And again, this is optional and just to help with our future outreach efforts and just where to make improvements going forward. Okay, so it looks like polling has stopped for these 2 questions. So thank you for taking the time. I do just want to expand on number 2 there of what brought you here today. Again, that's just a helpful way to gather information from the audience and to look at our messaging going forward. And I see that someone was unable to submit, so we'll make a record of another attendee in Ward 6. So thank you for the heads up there, Mary. All right, going to end polling here. And should be able to see the results if interested. And I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So just bear with me as I download. Okay. All right. Moving on. We'd like to, one last thing before getting into the presentation, just giving you a reminder and a request to use the chat box throughout our presentation for any questions or comments, and that we can address those at the end of this presentation during the open discussion period. And so to start things off, if you'd like to use the chat box, please consider sharing a little bit about yourself. You may share your name, favorite tree, or expand on the question of what brought you here today, and even just some general comments or questions that we can address later on in the session here. All right, well, thank you all for participating in the warm-up. And if Jeff could monitor some of the chats coming in case there's something urgent, I'll keep going through with the presentation here. But feel free to interrupt if there's something that needs addressed here. So thanks again for participating in the warm-up. And now I'd like to get into the presentation. As a reminder, we'll discuss the extent and benefits of the urban forest, the project findings, draft goals and actions, and we'll have time for open discussion. To present a plan for the urban forest, it's important to describe the extent. There are various landscapes that comprise the urban forest. So we look at citywide across all landscapes and ownership types by looking at the top left image on the screen. We also look at natural areas or open space and riparian areas and the trees along waterways such as the Zumbro River. We look at trees on academic and institutional lands and trees in parks like Allendale and residential trees. We look at trees in industrial areas and as part of the destination medical center projects and trees in commercial or downtown areas. So in any landscape, trees like sidewalk and other infrastructure are vital assets that require cohesive planning and management to sustain and enhance the associated benefits and the city's levels of service. While the master plan touches on all of these landscapes, it's focused primarily on the public tree population. And those are the trees along the boulevards, in public parks, and in open space. These trees across the landscape provide services and benefits to the community. The urban forest reduces stormwater and improves water quality. Trees provide shade over sidewalks and parking lots to reduce urban heat islands and save energy. And trees increase property values and improve human health and well-being, among many other environmental, economic, and social benefits. Not only are these benefits seen and felt, they can be measured and quantified. The value of individual trees and the entire urban forest can be calculated in terms of increased property values, human health impacts of improving air quality, the savings acquired from reducing stormwater that would otherwise be managed by a treatment facility, and the reduced energy use as a result of trees providing shade over residential and commercial properties. An example of this was applied to a subset of Rochester's tree population. An iTree study of 41,000 public trees was completed in 2018, and the ecosystem benefits were calculated using the U.S. Forest Service's iTree tools. It was found that the 41,000 trees provide nearly $1.3 million in benefits annually. So keep in mind, this is just a subset of the public tree population. It's estimated that Parks and Forestry Division manage over 100,000 trees. So this is just a subset of the benefits that I'll be describing here. Over $700,000 of benefits are derived from stormwater management. And it's estimated that the 41,000 trees prevent nearly 27 million gallons of stormwater runoff per year. And when you look at the numbers, that's equivalent to over 40 Olympic-sized swimming pools. In addition, the 41,000 trees sequester the carbon dioxide emitted from nearly 400 vehicles per year, with some assumptions of miles per gallon and miles traveled per year. But that's 400 vehicle emissions sequestered from the existing 41,000 trees. It was also found that the 41,000 trees save energy equivalent to the usage of 329 family households annually, with an average of 4,500 kilowatts per household per year. So imagine what the entire public tree population provides, or even the entire urban forest across all those landscapes that I described. Fortunately, the city completed a high-resolution tree canopy assessment in 2020 that looks at tree canopy cover citywide, a top-down approach. And through that assessment, we found that all trees in Rochester provide over $66 million in annual benefits. And those benefits correlate with the services and benefits that are listed on the screen here. While the benefits and services provided by the city's urban forests are well known, the master plan must also address challenges facing the future of Rochester's trees. These challenges may include population growth. As populations continue to expand, the space for new plantings can be reduced and existing trees may sometimes need to be removed. Native and exotic tree pests and diseases continue to threaten urban and rural trees, and future unknown pests are always a concern. Invasive plant species compete with beneficial vegetation and provide less ecosystem benefits that I described in the previous slides. The needs of the city must be addressed and not conflict with other goals of the city, such as the management of stormwater and being resilient to the effects of climate change. Insufficient resources in terms of staffing and funding can lead to deferred tree maintenance and lower the levels of service provided to the community. Storms and disasters require proper procedures to prepare, manage, and recover. Urban forest policy must be reviewed and updated to support goals of the Urban Forest Master Plan and the community as a whole, while not discouraging smart development and other city operations. So this plan will improve efficiencies, workflows, policies, procedures, and communications relating to trees and construction conflicts. And staff and department responsibilities and workflows must be addressed as the urban forestry program is evaluated in the planning process. Just want to pause here to take a look at the chats coming in and appreciate all the discussions here. We're getting all kinds of different responses on favorite trees, places to visit, and I'm really glad to see the participation here. So thank you. We'll circle back on those chats and keep them flowing as we're going here, and also any questions you have. Now that we set the stage by providing the extent of the urban forest, those landscapes that I described, the benefits of trees, and the key issues, we're going to take a look at the key resources and opportunities as it relates to Rochester's urban forest. Much of the urban forestry program is coordinated by the Parks and Recreation's Parks and Forestry Division and is supported by other departments and partners. The Parks and Forestry Division, or referred to as Division going forward, is responsible for the management of park and boulevard trees, totaling over 100,000 public trees on over 3,900 acres. There are a variety of programs managed or supported by the division. For example, the division is responsible for enforcing ordinances regarding emerald ash borer, Dutch elm disease, high-risk trees, and other concerns. They also provide permits and facilitate funding for planting and working on boulevard trees, as well as in other natural landscapes. The division offers volunteer opportunities for planting trees through the Citizen Forester Program, learning and implementing proper pruning techniques through the Citizen Pruner Program, and even spotting tree issues through the Neighborhood Tree Watch. And those programs are in partnership with other partners, but they are great opportunities for the community to get engaged in urban forestry. Finally, the division offers citizens many resources for identifying trees, managing invasives, dealing with common pests and diseases, and other resources to support the urban forest in your backyard and to support your neighborhood urban forest. It's also important to evaluate existing city and partner plans. That helps us to gauge the city's readiness for improved urban forest management guided by the master plan. So this master plan recognizes and supports existing planning efforts such as the Parks and Recreation System Plan, the Plan for Destination Medical Center, or DMC, which is an economic development initiative to secure the Mayo Clinic's and Minnesota's status as a global medical destination. We also look at downtown plans, such as the Downtown Rochester Master Plan, the Rochester Comprehensive Plan, which is a long-range planning effort to address growth, change, and resiliency, and the Emerald Ash Borer, or EAB Strategic Plan, which was established to monitor, manage, and recover from the exotic pest that is decimating the ash trees throughout Rochester. So the city's been implementing that plan and taking care of the ash trees that are public trees throughout the city. Our planning approach was designed to evaluate these existing plans to find where the Urban Forest Master Plan could leverage existing resources and efforts, and to make sure that the goals and actions in the plan do not conflict with other city efforts and initiatives. So we want to make sure that these recommendations are in agreement with other programs and departments. Lastly, a strong foundation of policies are required for any successful urban forestry program. The city has urban forestry related policies under sections 6 and 9 of municipal code. These sections provide the guidance for tree protection, maintenance, removals, and planting. In addition to municipal code, there are supporting manuals, standards, and specifications. Some of these include the zoning ordinance and land development manual, the approved boulevard tree list, and specific planting specifications. So these programs, plans, and policies all provide the framework and the foundation for implementing the Urban Forest Master Plan. And just taking a pause here to offer this transition into project findings and a reminder to use the chat box to share your comments and questions. And again, I appreciate all the discussions that are going on in the chat right now. We can take a look at what brought you here today, favorite tree, other tree related topic, and any comments or questions about the presentation or the project. Now that we've defined the urban forest, discussed the key issues facing trees, and outlined existing resources, we'll discuss the initial project findings that inform the primary framework of the Urban Forest Master Plan. So this gets into some of the details which help to develop the strategies and actions and goals in the master plan. And if you have questions about what's presented, we have the research summary, which dives deep into the data and talks about the findings and interpretations of the results. So what's not presented in this presentation, we can certainly follow up with and discuss more. We're trying to just condense it into a couple slides here going forward. So to begin this discussion, I present to you the draft vision for Rochester's urban forests, which is on the left, and we have an overall mission of the plan on the right. And keep in mind, some of this is in draft stage. So this is an opportunity to weigh in on things such as the vision, plan, mission, and the goals and actions that we'll present to you. So the vision reads, healthy trees, healthy city. Our city's trees, forests, and other natural resources are recognized as integral to sustaining life and health for all city residents. A healthy, thriving, and sustainable urban forest is a community priority to be thoughtfully managed and cared for by partnerships between the city and its residents to maximize public safety and benefits that include a thriving ecosystem, vibrant economy, and livable communities shared by all who live, work, and play in Rochester. So the mission statement then describes the partners involved, the purpose of the plan, the framework, objectives, and a call to action. With these vision and mission statements in mind, we're excited to present to you the findings and initial framework of the Urban Forest Master Plan. As a reminder from our last meeting, the Urban Forest Master Plan was developed by implementing 6 planning elements described on the left here on your screen. We gathered and analyzed existing plans and resources, city staff and community input, existing data such as the canopy assessment and inventory, and Rochester's benchmarks compared to industry standards and similar cities to complete the U.S. Forest Service's Urban Forest Audit System. The outcomes from these 6 planning elements were summarized in a research summary document and discussed with the city project team to inform the Urban Forest Master Plan. So at this stage, we're completing the final version of the research summary. We have an internal draft of the master plan, but we're looking for your input throughout this noon session and the evening session to refine the master plan draft and get it sent to the city project team for review. To develop and implement urban forestry goals, it's important to have a baseline measurement to monitor progress. So to do this, many cities throughout the world are completing what is known as an urban tree canopy or tree canopy assessment. Rochester completed this assessment in 2020 and it was part of the master plan project. So this assessment is conducted using aerial imagery, LiDAR, and other data sets for a top-down look at canopy or land cover with a focus on tree canopy. So when viewed from above, we look at the amount of land area that is covered or shaded by tree canopy and the possible planting space available. That is your grass, turf, and even parking lot areas that can be shaded with adjacent trees or removal of parking lot space for planting of trees. And we also look at this across the city and by different ownership types. Monitoring changes to these land cover types over time will inform plan implementation progress. It'll analyze the impact of policy changes. It'll identify priority planting areas and identify potential causes for canopy loss. And it'll inform necessary adjustments to be made to the master plan strategic actions. So this is a crucial part of the process here, having your baseline canopy assessment. A little bit more on the canopy assessment. Again, we're looking big picture. How much tree cover is there across the city, across those landscapes that I described? So based on the analysis, we find that 28% of the city's land area is covered by the canopy of trees. That's over 9,700 acres, which is equivalent to approximately 7,400 NFL-sized football fields. So that gives you an idea. If you were to group all that canopy from all individual trees into one mass, you would have over 7,400 NFL-sized football fields. It's a lot of canopy. So this canopy cover includes public and private trees, and it looks at trees across every landscape. The assessment also looked at the possible area for planting more trees, and it was found that 38% of Rochester's land area is either grass or impervious areas, which could theoretically be space for planting trees. You would need to do additional analyses of ownership, land use type, and purpose or function of that site to refine what is possible and inform the city as to what is feasible, but that gives you an idea of what may be possible in the city for planting. And this information will help Rochester and partners finalize citywide and localized tree canopy goals. While 28% of the city is shaded by tree canopy, it's important to note that impervious surfaces cover the same amount of the city as the urban forest. And impervious areas are your building rooftops, sidewalks, parking lots, and driveways, which contribute to stormwater runoff and increased surface temperatures, which are referred to as the urban heat island effect. Another important component to the UTC assessment is the evaluation of canopy change over time. And for this study, we used the data from the 2020 assessment, which analyzed imagery from 2019 and conducted a historical assessment using imagery from 1999. So it was found between this 20-year period that canopy increased by 8.1%. And that's a standard error of less than 2% for that estimate. So this is roughly an increase of over 2,800 acres of canopy in the 20-year time span at a rate of 140 acres of canopy per year. Understanding how and where canopy has changed informs policies and practices described in the master plan. And the master plan takes a closer look at what were the causes of these increases to canopy. Perhaps it's ordinance related or program related or staffing, community commitments, development requirements. We take a look at all those different factors. And just wanted to share that not only are we looking citywide, we're also looking at these other boundaries too. So you know how much tree cover is citywide, you can understand how much tree cover or which ward or precinct has the highest amount of tree cover or the most opportunity to plant trees. So it gives you the metrics to start prioritizing efforts. And then we just look at another way to prioritize efforts. So we have an understanding of the existing tree canopy. We also know the possible planting area, the grass and parking lot areas. We can start to use those metrics to refine the data and come up with prioritizations that we look at what areas are most suitable to plant trees to address air quality concerns, asthma concerns, vulnerable and underserved populations, other environmental concerns like stormwater, and social concerns such as public health and well-being. So with different data layers from the US Census Bureau and the tree canopy assessment, we can find those priority areas. And that'll help the city and its partners secure grants, whether it be tree related, asthma or air quality related, energy savings, or equity related, this data can provide the means to secure grants to plant trees throughout the city. So now we'll switch gears and look at the bottom-up approach. And as we look at the urban forests of today, we describe the data and information relating to the public tree population. And as I mentioned, the city has an inventory of public trees. And at the time of some of the analyses, there were 41,000 trees. With our analyses going forward here in 2021, there are over 57,000 data points. And as I mentioned before, Parks and Forestry manage roughly 100,000 total public trees. That's looking at parks, boulevards, open space. And so the city has over 100 public park areas that contain trees in maintained areas and natural areas. And as I mentioned, those parks comprise over 3,500 acres. And there are also more than 85 miles of paved trails. So all of this adds up to an incredible urban forest resource for the area, and one that must be planned for, cared for, and sustained in order to achieve its full potential and provide the maximum benefit for Rochester's residents. So just a few notes on some of the inventory analysis. We look at, again, the 5,700 data points to come up with an idea of tree abundance, the distribution, composition, size classes, and functional benefit. And so this information informs the master plan strategies and the recommendations. Just one example here, of the 57,000 public trees, there are 86 unique tree species. But something to note is that there is a high percentage of Norway maples and green ash trees. So I mentioned emerald ash borer, and we do know that the city is implementing the emerald ash borer strategic plan. So we need to also look at how the urban forest is going to be replanted. So this information is utilized to provide recommendations in the master plan. The top graph there just shows relative performance index. And this gives us an idea of what species are doing really well in the urban forest. So we measure their quantity and their condition to the overall public tree population. And we find that at this time, Kentucky coffee trees and swamp white oaks are performing the best in the public tree population. And again, these data summaries are available in the research summary that will be made available to the public as part of this project. And so there's additional details that you can uncover there. Another key planning element, closely examine existing urban forest metrics or benchmarks that were cross-examined with industry standards and communities that were similar in location, size, program structure, population, and other attributes. So we utilized two data sets, the 2019 Arbor Day Foundation Tree City USA records of about 3,500 Tree City communities. And then the second database utilizes the Municipal Tree Care and Management in the United States, a 2014 Urban and Community Forestry Census of tree activities. And that's where we get an idea of urban forestry programs across the country by specific region and by population group, the same population group for Rochester. And then with this information, we can get an understanding of industry standards and cities comparable in size or program structure in terms of how the program's set up, what's the funding, the staffing structure, and other benchmarks to set so that as we provide the recommendations in the master plan and the master plan gets implemented, we can look to measure those benchmarks and report on the progress made. So on the left, we have the 2019 Tree City USA records for Rochester in that table. And then the regional averages are on the right. And the graph above the table provides you with a list of some of the communities that were involved in that comparison exercise. And so just presenting this as an overview of some of the metrics that are evaluated in the benchmarking process. So then we look at phase two. which looks at that 2014 community forestry census. In this analysis, we find that while Rochester has a higher overall program budget compared to the population group of 100,000 to 250,000 people, the city has more public trees and park space than the average for the population group. So these metrics start to tell a story here and what may be considered in the master plan. The chart provides a breakdown of the average budget per public tree, which is a common metric used to compare urban forestry programs. Rochester's budget per public tree is much lower than the region's or the population group. As the urban forest grows and changes, these metrics should continually be evaluated to identify any necessary resource changes and to continue to provide that high level of service that Rochester strives for. So now we're getting into another planning element referred to here as community engagement or community interest and input. And the engagement and input from the community helps to inform the master plan's vision, goals, actions, and this was gathered through previous virtual community meetings and 2 online public surveys. Between the 2 public surveys, over 400 city residents responded to a total of 33 questions relating to Rochester's existing urban forest, the resources to manage it, and the perceptions of the condition and extent of the urban forest. And this feedback was incorporated into the draft goals, recommendations, and observations in the master plan. So just some summaries of what we've uncovered from the 2 surveys. Over 3/4 of the responses feel the city is doing a good job at managing public trees, though nearly 50% of responses noted a decline in tree health in the last 10 years. The majority of responses see the urban forest as improving air quality as the most appreciated benefit. And 80% support more tree canopy and a citywide canopy goal. But nearly 2/3 of responses believe the city is understaffed to manage the public tree population and is not pruning enough public trees annually. Questions with the option for open comments gathered nearly 500 responses. These responses were then manually categorized. Of the comments, the majority mentioned increasing tree canopy coverage and plantings with a supportive tree preservation ordinance that's guided by a tree canopy goal and appropriate staffing levels to grow an urban forest that is resilient to tree pests and diseases, as well as climate change and hardscape conflicts, which would result in an equitable urban forest that benefits all residents. So that's just consolidating the comments and making some broad generalizations, but those were the recurring themes. And we also identify the concerns and issues stated in the comments as well. But overall, a resounding positive feedback from the community, which is a great thing to see. All right, so getting into the last planning element, and then we'll switch over to some additional highlights from the project findings, and then get into the primary framework, the goals and actions. So we tie in all those other planning elements from the existing policies and plans to the community engagement into this urban forest audit system, which was first developed by the U.S. Forest Service, and then we tailored it specifically to Rochester. And this system evaluates the urban forest, the programs that manage it, and the community that shapes and benefits from it. To develop this plan, over 40 documents and plans were gathered and applied to the audit system's discovery matrix. And I'm just going to pause here to see if there are any questions or comments to immediately address. But nope, just seeing good dialogue going in the chat box. So thank you for that. So yeah, we gather the resources, analyze them, and then align them with the categories in the audit. There are 11 categories. They're listed on that table there on your screen. And within those 11 categories are 130 subcategories or elements. And these categories range from management policy and ordinances to green asset evaluation. Within these categories, we then rank those elements, those 130 elements, based on our review and the other 5 planning elements. So then you get a scoring system. For each element, we rank the city in terms of 0, not practiced, 1, in development, and 2, adopted common practice. And with this ranking of all 130 elements, we're able to score Rochester for each of the 11 categories and use this information to establish goals to close gaps and the strategies to achieve a higher ranking within those categories. The planning consultants completed 4 rounds of this audit with extensive reviews from the city project team. And through this systematic evaluation, it was determined that the city of Rochester scored a 78% in terms of urban forest sustainability and management, as defined by the U.S. Forest Service partners and by the planning consultants for this project. I should note that 2/3 of the categories, the city scored over 75%. And a lot of this success is due to the city's existing urban forestry program that's staffed with trained professionals to manage the urban forest and is guided by strong standards and practices. And there are areas where the city scored relatively high, but there are also areas for improvement where we look at improvements to policy and urban forest management planning categories. And so the primary framework of the master plan provides the strategic actions to address these shortcomings and maintain strengths. And this audit serves as a monitoring tool going forward to measure progress by implementing the plan. And with that, looking to just wrap up the process of developing the master plan, again, showing you those 6 planning elements, ranging from doing the research, getting input from city staff and the community, analyzing data to establish benchmarks, and then applying it to the urban forest audit system. Excuse me. And within the research summary, we expand on these details quite a bit. Each of the planning elements has a section on the methodology, the findings, and interpretations. So I encourage you all to review that document when it's made available. But yep, those are the planning elements to inform the primary framework of the plan. One last slide before we get to the primary framework is to look at the question of what do we do with all this information that we presented. From our findings, we began to establish the goal and action framework. And through this process, we identified the need for establishing a citywide tree canopy goal and planting strategies to support this ambitious recommendation. The images on the slide are provided as an overview of what's included in the Urban Forest Master Plan draft. So starting on the far left, we see a map of Rochester's census blocks, color-coded by level of suitability for trees to address equity and underserved populations. Using this canopy data and the online canopy planning software, other themes and priorities can be evaluated, such as stormwater management, energy savings, vulnerable populations, and human health. The map in the center shows the census blocks most suited for trees to address all themes and priorities. These are areas where planting the right trees may have the most beneficial impact. And keep in mind, these are hypothetical scenarios presented as guidance in the master plan for the city to refine and finalize, but it provides some direction on how to utilize this data. So then the top right map shows one example of what a priority census block might look like. So we see in that cutout that over 6 acres of potential planting space are available on the site. And it has the one of the lowest existing tree canopy covered for a given census block. So there are some variables to consider, but this may be looked at as a low-hanging fruit opportunity. It has the least amount of tree canopy cover and the most space for planting more trees. Again, you need to do additional analyses, but this gives you the framework for how to address canopy goals and planting prioritization. Lastly, we'll just take a look at that table in the bottom right. And what we What we do here is provide guidance on how to establish canopy goals. In some communities, we just see a number picked out of thin air based on the existing canopy without a plan in place on how to achieve that canopy goal. So with this table, we provide just an overview of guidance on how to set realistic canopy goals. Take, for example, the residential zoning type, looking at the R1X residential subtype. So that subtype has an existing tree cover of 34%, and 41% of all of that land area in R1X is possible planting area. It's not feasible to plant all 41% plantable space. So we set a hypothetical target to plant 15% of that 41% available space. So then when you do the metrics of average tree size at maturity, we come up with 2,600 trees that would be required to infill the plantable space by 15%. What's the result of doing that? We see the canopy increase from 34% to 40% and nearly $30,000 in added benefits and services annually. So this is where we need to take a step back and look at what policies are in place to ensure that healthy trees remain in the urban forest so that we don't have a net loss of canopy and can plant going forward to achieve these canopy goals. So a lot of variables, but this is a good starting point to establish localized and citywide canopy goals. So that was a lot to present on the screen, but it is something that we expand on in the Urban Forest Master Plan. It will require additional review and refinement from the city, to set those final canopy goals. But it is a overview and providing guidance on how to set those canopy goals and planting targets. So now that I've provided a summary of the outcomes from those 6 planning elements, we're ready to discuss how this information was integrated into the primary framework of the master plan. That's the vision, the goals, strategies, and actions. So again, just a reminder to use the chat box, and there will be 2 more poll questions towards the end of this next section. So we look at what's presented as the draft goals for the Urban Forest Master Plan. To achieve the vision for Rochester's urban forests of healthy trees, healthy city, a series of goals were derived from the audit. And if you recall, that audit had 11 categories. These 6 goals presented on this slide integrate elements of those categories. So we look at goals addressing policy, looking at the actions necessary to maintain a solid foundation to ensure long-lasting impacts. We look at the goal to address staffing levels and training and capacity. We also establish a goal to have consistent and diversified budget and sustained funding. We look at a goal for assessments and plans to have a thorough understanding of the urban forest and what's needed to support actions in the other goal categories. And a plan is only successful when there's a shared commitment from the community to support changes to policy or budget. And it's only successful when a community is eager to participate and engage in the stewardship of the urban forest. So this is guided by the community engagement goals. Lastly, under the green asset goal, the urban forest is planned and managed as a city asset that requires efficient and effective operations. And these operations are to maintain urban forest health and public safety. So those are the 6 draft goals for the Urban Forest Master Plan. We then get into the actions, and we have a series of actions per goal for the Urban Forest Master Plan. They're not all presented in this meeting today, but they will be reviewed extensively as part of the internal draft review process and the input that we receive from these meetings. So just strategic actions to address each of the 6 master plan goals are listed here on this screen. And then Just wanted to end the goal and action framework with a description of what the actions entail. So this is just a snippet of the tree management policy action and some of this or goal and some of the supporting actions. So you see that each action has a priority, level of effort, the order by which it should be implemented, the action statement, the co-benefits, which I'll describe, and the lead and collaborators to implement, along with the supporting implementation year. And co-benefits are added value that is achieved by implementing that action. It can be community-based, equity-based, human health-based, or natural environment-based. And so we give a rating for each action on those co-benefits. All right, at this time, would like to just give another thing to think about and to add to the chat box. We presented to you those 6 draft goals for the Urban Forest Master Plan: tree management policy, capacity, training, and authority, budget and funding, assessments and plans, community, and green asset management. So just think about what are some of the ways in which you could get involved in the implementation of actions to achieve goals for the urban forest, as mentioned on the previous slides. And for example, for policies, you may consider attending city council meetings, participating in future tree-related surveys, or sharing your thoughts on social media and other platforms. So that's one example of ways to get engaged, and also think about some opportunities that we may have missed in the planning approach. Just another example to think about when you look at how you could support the capacity goals. You may consider volunteering for events, planting and attending young tree care training, looking at participating with citizen pruner or forester programs, and also looking at opportunities to engage the youth and job training opportunities. So those are just some examples to think about and to jot down in the chat box, and we can circle back on with our open discussion. I have a poll question coming up here in the next slide, but just wanted to give you an overview of the monitoring. You need to know where you're going, and you need to know how you're going to get there, and then you need to know how are we doing. And so this implementation and monitoring process follows the evaluate, monitor, report, and revise methodology. And just some screenshots of the approaches that are integrated into the master plan for monitoring, reporting out, and revising actions in an adaptive management approach. All right, and I'm just going to give a quick overview of and wrap up the presentation topics that were discussed, looking at the extent, the benefits, the key issues, the opportunities, the project findings of those 6 planning elements, some guidance on canopy goals and planting priorities, and then ending with the primary framework, the goals, actions, and the monitoring plan. And with that, going to just summarize with where we're at and where we're heading. And so the draft plan is being completed. We're going to incorporate feedback, and then we're going to send it to the city project team for internal review and take in their considerations from the feedback that we received from these meetings, as well as their internal review of the sections. And then we anticipate a June 2021 plan completion. But we are still finalizing some final timelines and deliverables, but that is where we were at and where we're heading with the project. And at this time, I'm going to open up the poll, and there should be 2 questions on that. And you can also start the discussions in the chat box, and feel free to hit that raise hand button if you would like to speak up about any topic or question that you may have. So there are two questions, mainly just getting an idea of the next steps and how to follow up with folks. And then also just some feedback on the meeting itself, where to make improvements and what you got out of this this session here today. So I'll be leaving this on the screen here for a little bit. If this is completely optional, if you'd rather just speak up in the open discussion that's coming up right after this this poll is done. I'm seeing the votes coming in, so thank you for participating here. All right, and with that, I'm going to leave the poll running, but I do want to look at some of the chat questions or comments. And also, if you do see the raise hand feature, again, we invite you to hit that button if you'd like to share any comments. And you can also, at the end of the presentation, see our contact information if you'd prefer that. So we're just looking through the chat box and monitoring the polls, and get a question here. Let's start off with some of the favorite trees. We got a Japanese lilac, Kentucky coffee tree, that's my favorite, tamarack, bur oak is another one of my favorite. I think I have too many favorites, but they all have different purposes. Got the living fossil, the ginkgo tree, pawpaw, I have them. Gotta try my pawpaw cranberry muffins. They're really good, but they're difficult to get before the squirrels. Then we have folks enjoying Soldiers Field, and the favorite tree is any native that provides shade along the bike trails. We got maple and spruce, the glorious elm. This is great, lots of good discussion here. We also have some questions about the how can residents help improve tree canopy? Are there locations where independent planting is sanctioned? And we have the city staff responding to those questions there. And I'm going to end the poll here, share results, and download. And I'm just going to go through, whoops, sorry. Going to just go through some more of the chats here, but we'll be saving the chat to review after the meeting. And this is your opportunity to continue the conversation in the chat or the raise hand feature, and our contact information will soon follow here. Just making sure I downloaded it. And if you can see the poll results, we see a lot of interest in tree preservation and urban forest growth. And I'll circle back to that, but I see a raised hand. So Dwayne, I believe I unmuted you. Right, so I hit the request that you unmute, and then if you see that microphone with the line through, go ahead and touch that to unmute.
Well, yeah, one thing I noticed is that after the trees are planted by the city, they don't take proper care of them. I've noticed where the bark on the trees have been scuffed by deer, and when they mow the grass around them, they ring the tree and they kill the tree. I think after we do this planting, we need to be more careful about how we maintain them.
Yeah, that's a great point there, Dwayne, and maybe Jeff can expand, but a lot of this master planning effort was to mainstream urban forest management so that a shared understanding of the importance of trees and the post-planting care requirements is understood by all departments. And I think having a plan in place for post-planting care is essential if going to have healthy trees and achieve any canopy goals that the city does set. So thank you for that comment there, Dwayne.
And I would agree with what Chris said. I'd also mention that because the majority of the trees that we plant are either in parks or on boulevards and maintained by the adjacent property owners, that's one of our biggest challenges is getting people to understand that they can damage trees just by using their weed whips around them. So there's no question that's a challenge.
Right. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Just going through the chat here, we are at the top of the hour. So I wanted to present to you the contact information to continue this discussion. The city forester's email address, Jeff's on the line here and his email address is listed there. And we'll be going through these chat discussions to make sure that all questions were addressed. But I think for the most part, Jeff, you did a good job of handling all the traffic here. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't quite get to address that last one, asking about appropriate space for trees.
Oh, right. Yep. Right. Yeah. So go ahead.
Just a quick answer to that. I mean, 1,000 square feet should be able to support a large stature tree. You know, one of our goals, and when we plant trees, is we try to plant the largest stature tree that the site will accommodate, simply to maximize the benefits we get from their canopy. So I think Bill asked that question, and if you have 1,000 square feet of space, you could certainly plant a medium stature, if not a large stature tree at maturity.
Right. Yep. Right. And given the time, Jeff, whoops, sorry. If you'd like to give some closing words, that way folks that need to get going can sign off here. But before Jeff does, just want to say thank you, everyone, and I'll turn it over to Jeff, and then we'll do some closing.
Yeah, thank you. And I certainly want to extend my deepest thank you to everybody that took time out of their day to come and provide this feedback. It's instrumental in helping us create a shared vision on how we want our urban forest to look for future generations of Rochester residents. A special thank you to you, Chris, and your team, and Andrew, everyone who worked diligently through this entire process to provide an excellent document that we'll use to manage our urban forest for the next 20 years. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate
that. Yep. And thanks also coming from me. Really appreciate everyone taking the time. And just a reminder of the evening session at 6:30. This is recorded. The presentation can also be provided as a resource. So keep that in mind as you're discussing among your networks. Perhaps there's someone that can join that wasn't able to at this session here. So with that, stay tuned for those recordings and the presentation and any follow-ups needed from the chat. But we appreciate you taking the time and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.